That's right, explorers. I'm David, that's Wesley, and we're back on the Trailcast.
Did you miss us? I hope so. Oh well. So, David, today, what do we have slated for the podcast?
The beginning of the end for Disney Star Wars.
Yes. The Force Awakens.
Or you could just say the beginning, but, there wasn't really much of a... I don't know, it went up, then it went immediately down.
I don't know. I'm gonna be honest here. Actually, I'm gonna be even more honest than I was gonna be there. First off, I actually did not watch the movie. I forgot.
I actually didn't either, so... But
But
I do remember this movie. So... It's
But
not
to
like,
be fair, like with Mockingjay, what I did with that one, I listened to the novelization of this movie. I was planning on doing both, but then Christmas got in the way, and I forgot to watch the movie. So, but I have a bunch of thoughts, and those thoughts are this movie. Wow, I think you and I agreed when we saw it in theaters. It was like the greatest thing ever. I was actually really bad. Well,
yeah.
we thought it was good.
Well, okay.
I'm gonna petition for the fact that it's a bad movie.
And here's an interesting thing too that we do need to get into, because this is the first of the mainline Star Wars movies that we actually saw in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Well, technically, this was the first Star Wars movie ever I saw in the theater.
Would have been the same for me because the one before this would have been Revenge of the Sith. I was right. My first thought, Revenge of the Sith, and that would have been in 2005, and we were what 3 or 4.
Yeah. So, yeah, but so I do want to talk about that aspect of it too. But let's go ahead and just dive into the story a little bit, because give people a little bit of a refresher. Because I know we haven't talked about it yet or anything, but as of recording this, we have not talked about doing a recap for this. So presumably, we haven't done one. So we should probably go ahead and just dive a little bit into the story of this movie.
All right, you want to?
So
we go ahead and recap it. I'm gonna shut up. People hear enough.
Yeah. So, well, actually, all you really need to do is go back and rewatch our recap for A New Hope, and there you go. But
I have thoughts on that too.
Anyway, but yeah, so starts off with Kylo Ren and his rip-off stormtroopers invading this camp of they never explain who those people are in the beginning of this movie.
Just a place.
So basically, Kylo Ren is looking for the map to Luke Skywalker, who this random guy has, who they never explain in the movies who he is. They explain it in the comics, but not in the movies.
I do want to point out this one thing here, because this is a criticism that I've seen for both this and for both Ahsoka, or for this and Ahsoka. The map that leads to Luke Skywalker was not like X marks the spot. This is exactly where Luke Skywalker is. Same with Thrawn. It's a map to a place where they went. So this is not a map that they made up. Like, this is a map that was pre-existing, but was to an outer rim area, in the unknown regions kind of a thing. Not necessarily like, hey, I put breadcrumbs on the path to where I went. It was like, no, this is a map that leads to where he's at, but not necessarily one that he himself made. I was watching CinemaSins earlier today, and that was something that they pointed out, and I was like, no, that's not how this is. This isn't a map that he makes. It's a map that, was compiled over years, like even at the end of it, so they get this little piece of the map, right? Well, the part that R2 has at the end of it is a part of the map that he got from the Empire. Because they even say it within the I don't know if in the movie, but they even talk about it that they are the First Order is trying to get the map here because they have the rest of it because of the archives that the Empire had left over.
Mhm.
They had already archived part of it. So I would just say that that's something that bugs me. You're like, no, like in Ahsoka, the map does not lead to Thrawn. It's not something he made. It's a map that leads to that part of the galaxy that is at this point in time not known, and there's only like one map or something to it. Essentially, is the gist of it. But anyways, continue.
Mhm. Yeah, so the old guy is giving the map to the Resistance pilot Poe Dameron, which we'll get into how dumb that the fact that there's a resistance when there's already a good government in place, how dumb that is. But anyway, yeah, the Resistance pilot Poe Dameron, and when the First Order shows up, he gives it to his droid BB-8, which is a ripoff of R2-D2, who takes it to the other side of the planet where they meet, or where he meets Rey, and Poe ends up getting captured and ends up breaking out with a stormtrooper who goes on to become Finn, and
FN 218.
yeah, FN 218, FN 218-7. Wait,
I think it's 218.
Anyways, it's one of those. Anyway, then through a series of events, Finn ends up thinking Poe died. Finn and Rey end up together. They steal the Millennium Falcon, not from Han, but from someone else, and then end up finding Han, who takes the ship back from them. And then long series of events. There's a new Death Star made out of the planet Ilum, even though that's not specified. We only know that because of Fallen Order. And then they blow it up. And also Han died. And also Luke's at the very end of it.
I feel like it's a really good summary, David, of the okay. This movie, on the surface level, is a really good Star Wars movie. It was great because it was the first Star Wars movie we had seen in it came out in 2015, right?
Okay.
It's been 10
Yes.
years. So on the surface, it's like, oh wow, such a great Star Wars movie. For people who don't like the sequels, it's like, oh well, Force Awakens is good, but the other two are really the bad part. And we're gonna dive into this. This is the point of this. We're gonna dive into this as we start talking a little bit more about this. But this movie makes no sense. Like every little detail about this movie makes no sense. And when you start to scrutinize it a little bit, you just see how little sense this movie makes. Starting off with one thing that you mentioned. One thing that you mentioned with Resistance and First Order. Now, before we get into the Resistance, I want to talk about this within this realm. Then I'll say about his origins a little bit later on, either it's in this film or the next one. But he says he's taken from a family he never knew and basically taken and put in this thing, right? So essentially, this remnants of the Empire is where the Forced Order comes from. It is eventually down the line remnants of the Empire coming back together. They get enough power to overtake systems and basically, like you were saying, make the pre-established New Republic that took over at the end of Return of the Jedi and started doing things, made them, quote unquote, the rebels again. I mean, they still have control of the Senate. When the Empire was in control, the Empire had control of the Senate. But the New Republic is still a thing. The Resistance, the First Order, is just a terrorist group out in the outer regions, basically. But they're taking people and taking over systems.
What's dumb too is where is the where's the New Republic military? Because presumably they had one. Did they all leave and go join the resistance? Like what?
Yeah.
So like what?
Like okay.
What is the New Republic doing during all this?
Okay. We see a lot during the gap years that we've been having filled in with like the Mandalorian and stuff like that. That in all honesty, the New Republic is a joke. We understand that, and the fact that it's gonna fall makes sense because, in all honesty, uh, it never turns out good when you have a rebellion topple an empire. Like that's it, whether it's a good thing or not. That never turns out in at least the immediate aftermath in a good way. You know,
Mm.
like there's so much more to fighting a war than there is to the aftermath of that, especially galaxy wide. Because I mean, the way that the Emperor took over, the way that Palpatine took over the galaxy was so seamless and so well planned out. But the way that the rebels took over was really just a ragtag group of people trying to take over the defeat this evil that they saw. But that still being said, like, how is it that we once again get the rebel in the form of the resistance, but the rebels versus this big superpower, you know? Where, here's another thing, where does the First Order get the money to build Starkiller Base? Because I know it's a planet, and so they built it around that, but it still would have cost a lot to make that.
And I mean, it was formerly an Imperial base because like I said, we do learn that in Fallen Order, like that the Imperials are the ones that dug the trench around the planet. They're the ones that probably set up a lot of the infrastructure on the planet. But
Mhm.
you know, Starkiller Base wasn't an Imperial plan. If it was, they would have done that instead of the second Death Star, or maybe even instead of the first Death Star.
Yeah.
So what?
There's a lot to just setting up of characters in this film. I do understand a little bit. So there's some certain things in the novelization of the book or in the movie that aren't in the movie. One being, so the reason that Leia sends Poe to get this map is because uh like well, he's the best, obviously. That's very clear. They make that very clear. But also it's like there's a lot of delegation within the Senate, and like it's a lot of people who aren't taking the First Order serious. Basically, what we see in Ahsoka, but years down the line when they're not taking the First Order serious after they didn't take Thrawn seriously. So basically this new republic doesn't learn, is what I'm hearing. um, they're stupid and full of a bunch of idiots. I mean, they're politicians, so duh. But that aside, um, but we think about this too. They are the same. They might not be at this point in time, but they're the same politicians that ran the empire,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Like there might have been a little switch up, but it's not like the whole entire government got. I mean, again, like we saw in Ahsoka, it's not like every single person who worked for the Empire is all of a sudden just a criminal and bad guy. People did it for a living. There are a lot of loyalists, but it's like this is such a hard thing to transfer over that there's some sense that gets made in why the New Republic is so fragile, but why it's so fragile to the sense of they aren't able to squash this obvious evil
Okay, but
coming up.
also the New
That's
Republic had been around. New Republic had been around for like 30 years at that point. It was
Mhm.
close to it, and yeah, you'd think that they would have been able to have at least some amount of a military to be able to squash something like that.
Even if like the Senate in and of itself is a problem, yes, a military. They have a military. Okay, the rebellion had a military, right? And they're growing that throughout shows like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. So what are we going to see what happened with Thrawn coming back? I know this is jumping all around, but there's obviously a lot of questions as to how we get from the end of Return of the Jedi to the beginning of the beginning of New Hope 2.0, Force Awakens. Um, with why the characters are here. Another thing, which is the basic and whole premise of this movie that doesn't make any sense within Star Wars and what outraged a lot of fans, was the characterization of Luke. What is Luke doing running off and hiding after none of it makes sense. Luke's
Mm-hmm.
character does not make sense in this. Luke's character, in all honesty, doesn't make sense in the TV shows either. I don't like the way that they don't make him the way that he should be.
Well,
And it's like
because
I feel like I think they missed the character arc of Luke through the original trilogy. They definitely missed it in the sequels, and I think they are pretty well missing it in
I mean,
the TV shows as well.
I feel like you can't blame the TV shows as much because they have to, all at that point all roads lead to the sequels. So
I
that
mean,
they
yeah,
kind of have to draw from
but
that
like
character too. But I did go saying also, what is it with Disney and making Han Solo just a deadbeat dad? Like I don't get it. We already talked about the Dial of Destiny on the podcast, and they did the same thing to
mhm.
Harrison Ford. Like I don't understand what that like the Han that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi wouldn't have left.
Well, you also think about it, with it all. So a couple reasons in which they talk about as to why Han left, all all are around the aspect of Ben Solo, right? So, uh, at least in the novelization, they talk about how Leia kind of sensed the turn in Ben as he was turning and kind of the pull from the dark side. Um, And I think that's what they were talking about. That's why she ended up taking him to Luke. But there's certain aspects where it's like, okay, I can kind of understand, she didn't want to put that burden on Han. And he maybe wouldn't understand it necessarily. So there's a little bit of a secrecy going on here. And when you keep secrets in a relationship like that, that's never going to end well. But that being said, they also talk a lot about how Han's like, he looks so much like me is apparently how it's supposed to be. And you didn't want to see me because it would remind you of him, basically. Where it's like the Han, like the Han at the end of Jedi would have been like, hey, I know this is hard, I know this is tough, but let's work through this. Let's stick around and try and bring our son back, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, I do understand the fact of like, oh, he goes back to doing the only thing he's good at, but I don't feel like he doesn't bear any responsibility for Ben turning, at least as far as what we're given. So, like, fact of him feeling like, oh, I'm such a bad dad, I caused this. Oh, she hates me now because of this. Oh, I'm gonna go back to smuggling. Like, it doesn't really make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't feel like I was about to say, Leia. I feel like they did the best with of the original cast, but at the same time, they didn't really do much with Leia in this movie. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she's in it more than Luke is, but they don't really give her much character development at all in this movie. She's just kind
Well,
of
I
there.
also wonder too. You think about it, like they talk about the Force abilities with Leia, some in the original trilogy, and definitely some in the shows. So, like aftermath of Return of the Jedi, you would think that there's some kind of a training going on, right? Aside from what we do see a little bit later on. So that being said, like she's just back in her own shoes. that she's been in from this original trilogy. She's just the politician, and a little bit more the politician and less, the fighter, because she's older. Obviously, that you can put her as a general, and then she just kind of does the battle plan stuff like that. But it's like, you'd think that maybe there's a little bit more, and she's not in it that much, relatively speaking. So, but like they don't really dive much into that until what the next other movie or the next movie or something
The
like
next
that,
one, yeah.
where she does a force float and keeps herself alive in space. Like, that's random. They could have showed some improvement in her at the beginning of or in the Force Awakens and made that make a little bit more sense, but instead they chose to not. Like, she can sense some things. She senses when Han dies. Like, there's things like that. But she was doing that back in Empire Strikes Back. She had the connection to the Force, but you would think that there's some kind of a growth that Luke would kind of coach her and train her a little bit in it, since she was Force sensitive. Maybe not to the point of being a Jedi necessarily, but still in some way, shape, or form, being able to use it a little bit.
Now, that being said, I do think they, compared to the next two, I want to stress that point because, compared to the original trilogy and stuff, you could probably make arguments against what I'm about to say. But compared to the next two, I think they actually did represent the Force pretty well. Because everything that they showed in this movie has already been established, like Leia, sensing Han's death.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is, at the end, with Rey pulling the lightsaber out of the snow.
And I'd say about anything Rey does doesn't make sense. But that being said, it's not like they're new things. And I'll get to my arguments with Rey in a little bit. But that being said, like you're saying, there is nothing new that they show in this that we haven't seen in Star Wars up until this point.
Well, we probably should go ahead and tackle Rey, because that's probably going to be a big thing we need to talk about with this movie. Because okay, so the example I've used, I think I probably used this before on the podcast, but I know I've used this a lot, and you've heard me say this before. But so okay, a lot of sequel fans will claim that Rey isn't a bad character, right? That Rey isn't poorly written, and they'll cite Luke as an example of this because Luke does a lot of the same things Rey does. Is their example, but look at the power creep and look at their skill levels at the end of their respective first movies.
Mm-hmm.
Luke doesn't even use a lightsaber in A New Hope. He doesn't even fight with a lightsaber until the end of Empire Strikes Back.
After training.
You could argue, yes, he does use the Force to guide the missiles in, but again, he's already had training.
I also feel like, in the sense of him guiding the missiles in, is more like him using the Force as in the same way of like, okay, him and his father were both really good pilots because they were attuned to the Force, which made their fast reflexes and stuff like that. I feel like he could it was more of a thing of he could sense out as opposed to using his.
Yeah, I don't think he manipulated the missile's trajectory with the Force.
Yeah.
He was able to sense when he should launch them with the Force.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Rey,
and that's very much in the same vein as like Leia in Empire Strikes Back, being able to sense Luke. So that's like a basic, hey, we're connected to the Force, and we're not only just connected to the Force, we're connected to the Force through the strongest family bloodline, that is probably in Star Wars, if not one of them,
Rey is able to use the Force after literally just hearing about it.
Mm-hmm. She thought it was a myth.
No one trained her whatsoever. Han just told her that it was real. and she was able to use it.
Here's my biggest bone. One of them. I have a lot of big bones. Got one here. Got one here. Here. Got some of my legs. Anyways, so my biggest bone to pick with this movie is so the first time Rey uses the Force, Kylo has her, right? And he's trying to extract information from her. Now, Kylo Ren, up until this point, has been seen as he's a bad dude. He's coming up in here. He knows what he's doing. He's been trained, maybe not since birth, but he's been trained for a long time. He's very powerful. And up until this point in the movie, you're like, hey, this is a cool guy. He's cool. I mean, he made a blaster beam just freeze midair and without barely even thinking about it. And once he left, then it did something. Like there was no sweat on him to do something that cool. Whatever. Up until this point, he's been doing all these things. It's been great. He goes to extract information from Rey using his Jedi mind tricks, which is what he's been doing. He got it from Poe. That's how they usually get information, right? So he goes in there, and Rey not only resists him, but goes into his mind. Little Uno reverse card here. She doesn't even know what the Force is. Like, Kylo, that shouldn't be the problem. Okay? So she beats out Kylo in that sense. I would be okay, in all honesty, I'd be okay if she was just with the fact of her being attuned to the Force, if she could block out Kylo. If she had the ability to resist him. But the fact that she Uno reversed it on him and was like, oh, now I'm in your mind. That's stupid. If that's not something that someone wants to get riled up about, that's fine. You don't have to you can disagree with me on that one, whatever you want. But the thing is, after she does that, she's like, I don't know anything about the Force, but I'm going to do this thing called a Jedi mind trick and see if I can get the guard to get me out of this prison cell. And it works. I understand. Weak-minded. But she doesn't know what she's doing. And success rate. She's 2 for 2 here in Force-related things. And then she goes 3 for 3 later on when she pulls the lightsaber to her instead of it going to Kylo, who, again, is much stronger in the Force than her. It's like, I get what you're trying to do here, but you're basically, it's like when you're trying to achieve a goal, and you're like, oh, I want to have a 6-pack. You want to work for that? No. I want to have a 6-pack. It's like, no, you have to work to get the end result that you want. And this movie does no work whatsoever. It just gives you what they want done, a powerful Force user, and says, accept that because this is canon now. And it's like, no, you're literally doing no work here. This is random. All of a sudden, she can block out Kylo and get into his mind. All of a sudden, she can do a Jedi mind trick. All of a sudden, she can pull a lightsaber to her. All of a sudden, she can pick up a lightsaber for the first time and beat someone who's been using a lightsaber for years, basically. Like,
If they wanted to have,
none of this makes sense.
If they wanted to have a strong female lead, like new character, they could have brought Mara Jade in from Legends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, seriously.
Mm-hmm. I want to make it very clear to anyone listening. I want to make it very clear to anyone listening here. The reason me and David don't like the sequels is not because we're sexist. We have no problem with characters like Ahsoka. Okay, I have problems with the Ahsoka series, but the character of Ahsoka's fine. Mara Jade, she's really cool. She's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really crazy characters out in Star Wars that we love. But that's not the point. It's a matter of if you don't build up your character, you're not building a good character. You're not even building a character. You're just plopping someone down with no explanation whatsoever. And the thing is, too, it's not like you just basically brought this character in and said, "Hey, this is okay." Poe's an amazing pilot. Do we see him have any pilot training? No, but we know he's had it. He's not some scavenger on a planet for years and years and years. In certain ships and basically look through them and kind of essentially like fly them without flying them. So that's how she's so good when it comes to flying. Which is better than what you see in the movie, which is she sits in a ship and all of a sudden it works, and she's the best pilot in the galaxy.
So again, they used the same thing that they did in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and just someone who pretends to fly a ship is immediately good at it, or like the kid in Dial of Destiny who pretends to fly and he's good at flying. It's.
But that being said, that's a better explanation than her having never touched controls before and all of a sudden being the best pilot around. Like, it is a better explanation. It's not a great one, better. But anyways, go ahead and talk to me about.
Okay. But I'm going to kind of expand upon what you just were talking about. But with Rey, it's an original character. If you want the character to be good at something without having to, actually show the character getting good at it, just put it in the character's backstory that they already got good at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard.
Fighting off other scavengers with a bow staff does not mean you can use a lightsaber.
No.
I want to make that clear. The fact that she can fight and the fact that she can use a lightsaber, those two things are not the same. Finn knows how to use a gun. He does not know how to use a lightsaber. That shows when he gets in fights with lightsaber, it usually doesn't end well for him because he doesn't know how to use it. Rey has had as much experience, if not less, than Finn has, and she beats a Sith Lord, essentially. He's not... Anyways, you understand what I'm saying.
Finn should actually have more experience with that because we've already seen the First Order has like the shock weapons that are similar to it's not the same thing obviously, but it's similar. So Finn should be able to at least somewhat use.
I would assume they probably teach you about everything within that realm, but he may not even be that skilled. But yeah, you're right. You're right in that aspect. He should have some hand-to-hand,
but you're talking about with Rey. It's like okay, so you have someone who's skilled with let's say you have someone who's skilled using a sword. You give them a pair of nunchucks, they're gonna hit themselves in the head with them.
Yeah.
Just because you're proficient in the usage of one weapon does not mean that you're proficient in the use of any weapon. It's
exactly
weapons. It doesn't translate like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, okay, if it's a projectile and you're really good at shooting a gun and you can, you're a sniper, you probably can figure out it pretty easily. But yeah, swords to guns and nunchucks and all those, they're not the same. Also, lightsabers. For all intents and purposes, it's light. I mean, it's not light, but it's a light weapon. It's completely different than using a regular sword would be, or a bow staff, which has weight. Like, there's a completely different sense to using it,
Mm-hmm.
So even if you were good with swords, you'd have a better shot at it, but there'd still be that learning curve of using a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it of the three main characters, Rey is probably the one who would have the least. Who you'd expect the least to know how to. Well, maybe Poe, because I guess he's probably never dealt with melee weapons, but still, they shouldn't have Rey should have no idea how to use a lightsaber. She's lucky she didn't lose a finger or something.
Yeah, what's with her not using a hand? I mean, come on, that's like a trope. Okay, so
exactly.
I have this. Yeah, finger, David. No, you lose a hand, not just the finger. Anyways, so I have this thing that I found earlier, and I actually quite like. the theory here. Not the theory, but the analysis, basically. So I found a video earlier, and it was talking about basically the title. I'm pretty sure said, "The Force Awakens is not a remake of A New Hope," and I agree with this and understand how this goes. It's not a remake of A New Hope. It's a remake of the original trilogy. So, in the basic premise of the movie, you can think, okay, yeah, the whole entire thing is A New Hope, beat for beat. A lot of it is, but if you break it up into certain acts within the original trilogy, it actually makes a lot more sense. So you have the important plans, put in a droid on a desert planet with the person who has always lived on this desert planet. That's all A New Hope. Up until basically it's up until they go to his theory, at least, is up until they go to Maz Kanata's castle. It's up until there's A New Hope. After that, it's like them going to Cloud City and meeting up with a new friend. And then all that ends when at the end of it, one of their friends gets kidnapped. Like Han getting kidnapped at the end of Empire. And then from there is a combination of a lot of different things in Return of the Jedi, but it's the rescue / the ground assault and air assault of the big weapon, and then it combinates with the destruction of that and the defeat of the villain, in a sword duel. Which, that being said, this is the point I'm making. The reason I like that theory is that's why Rey, as a character, is rushed and doesn't make sense. Now, this in and of itself gives them freedom to do new things. Sure, this is what was said in the video, and I agree that this gives them the freedom to do new things in episode 8 and 9, which they did. But it also really, really hurts the character of Rey because it rushes her. She has to basically, in this idea, she has to go through the whole entire story arc that Luke goes through in 3 movies in just 2 hours. So that's why, and I'm not saying this is specifically what they were planning on doing, but that it's rushed because their story beats here that they could have played out into a much, much bigger story that they condense and then make them into this one movie that rushes the character development of a character that fans like you and I say is extremely underdeveloped.
And the whole thing with Rey 2 is so. I know I kind of touched on this earlier too, but how on earth did Rey win that fight? I know
okay.
Kylo Ren. Okay, I know Kylo Ren is supposed to the way they set it up is he lets his rage just kind of control him. But still, you don't forget all of your training, even if you're letting your rage control you.
Yeah, if anything,
literally all of your training, he literally forgot all of his training.
Yeah, if anything, in all honesty, the fact that he's enraged should mean that he's a little bit more powerful. I mean, obviously that he'll have errors here and there, but whenever you get mad,
he'll have errors in his lightsaber form and stuff, but he'll be way more aggressive. And canonically in Star Wars lore, the dark side comes from emotions. So having a really strong emotion should fuel his dark side. His force ability. So
exactly.
Why did Rey win?
So
how did Rey win?
We touched on this a little bit, but talking about the first time Luke used a lightsaber in a duel, he lost his hand. And I feel like they tried this is another thing of them packing so much in, and then it not them missing the point, basically. So they in Empire, when Luke fights Vader, Vader's testing him.
Mhm.
Vader would have killed him in an instant. That's a fact. Luke would have been dead if Vader wanted him dead. Vader didn't want him
Well,
dead.
actually,
At the end of it all, Vader was like, "Hey, join
well,
me, and we can overthrow the Emperor."
actually, neither time Vader fought Luke was Vader trying to kill Luke. Neither time.
I think even in Return of the Jedi, if Vader wanted to, Vader still could have easily killed Luke. He was more
That's what I'm saying.
trained, but the
That's what I'm
Empire,
saying.
Return of the Jedi takes place a year, as far as I remember, a year after Empire. Like, it's not been that long that Luke's been training more. I mean, he's trained more, but he hasn't been that long.
Like I said, neither time was Vader actually trying to kill Luke. If Vader wanted to, either time he could have killed Luke.
Yeah, and so at the end of the battle, you're like, okay, well, he didn't want to kill Luke. He wasn't, he was testing him. Why'd he cut his hand off? Why'd he do all that? Well, it was kind of one of those things where like Vader was just going at it for a little while, and then all of a sudden Luke landed a blow, and he was like, oh, okay, I actually need to take care of business here. Things got not necessarily serious, but hey, he landed a blow. So he cuts his hand off very easily, and then he corners his son, and we know the rest of the events. This is very similar to this, right? You could even put the parallels in here, right? So Rey and Kylo are fighting, and then all of a sudden, oh, look at that. Rey lands a blow. All right, now I need to take care of business. I've been toying with her a little bit. Now I need to take care of business. You can go with that, but then she ends up winning the battle, which is, how the end of Return goes. So it's like they lump those two things together, but I don't even know if you can say that too much because of the fact that, like you're saying, okay, Kylo's orders were to bring Rey to him to Snoke. So he probably didn't want to necessarily kill her, but at the same time, like, he didn't even kill Finn, which is kind of dumb. Well, I'm not entirely sure how deep the slash on his back went, but maybe he should have killed Finn. But anyways, it's like, I understand the fact that he was supposed to bring her to him, but at the same time, like, I mean, you took her out earlier, right? You did the mind thing and you made her fall asleep. Get this on her and do the same thing over again. Does your force powers not work anymore? Like, I don't know. I'm talking myself in circles because
And
I'm
again, so I mean, I know there's an example of like two Force users can't one Force user can't use the Force on another Force user, but at the same time, is Rey even a Force user at this point? She's had absolutely no formal training.
well,
Like none
that even being
whatsoever.
said, it depends on your skill level too. Like there is a force bubble, but it's kind of like where, somewhat like, okay, not Luke, Anakin and Obi-Wan would have a hard time doing their force things on each other because they're pretty well on the same level throughout most of the time. But like, we talked about with the original or this prequels with the prequels, how Palpatine helps Dooku get Obi-Wan out of the fight so that it's just Anakin and Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that can be done by Palpatine because he's a much higher level force user. And even if that's not necessarily the case, him and Dooku together
It's two against one, yeah.
would be easy. So at this point in time, whether she's a force user or not, she's basically like she's new to this. She's a baby in the force, and Kylo is at this point he's got to be within the force. Like he's got to at least be an adult, young adult maybe, but whatever. Stop with the analogies. I'll do that while I'm ahead. But it's like one of those things where it's like it shouldn't be hard for him to penetrate that force shield. It's like that. They throw all their logic. I mean, obviously, I understand, and there's so many problems within the way that they use the Force in the sequel trilogy. The quote from Han sums up the whole entire sequel trilogy. That's not how the Force works. And that's basically that's
Yeah,
happens throughout the whole thing.
I saw a meme that said that. I mean, I know that's where I got that from. That's where you got that from. But I saw a meme that said that, and I'm just like, that. Yeah, that quote from Han in this movie perfectly sums up the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Now, I want to talk about we've already kind of been talking about Kylo for here too, but I do want to talk about this too. So, the first half of this movie, Kylo Ren is actually a cool character. Up until the point where he takes his mask off. I about laughed in the theater when he took his mask off. No offense to Adam Driver. He is not threatening at all.
No.
And like the next movie, I know we don't really need to get into the next movie a whole bunch because we're talking about that next month. But in the Last Jedi, he barely wears the mask, and he's just a whiny brat when he's not wearing the mask.
Well, see, I think that's the thing is like, okay, the whiny brat aspect of it is like not completely gone within the first half up until he takes the mask. There's times that he's like that, right? But it's cooler because he's at this point still a cool character. But he becomes a full-fledged whiny brat throughout the rest of the second two movies, and it really does all hinge on the fact that he shows his face. Like, you can even have Adam Driver play the character, and you could even have it where he has screen time, but he needs to still be masked up Kylo Ren.
Like they could have done flashbacks with him, like in the present time, have him never take off the mask, but done flashbacks with young Ben Solo and having Adam Driver play. And in fact, they could have done that. They could have done that. So imagine this. Imagine if they did it this way in this movie, in the Force Awakens. If they'd had flashback scenes and the present day stuff, and then the flashback scenes are leading to the fall of Ben Solo, and simultaneously have it to where like Rey and Finn are confronting Kylo or something, and as in the flashbacks, the fall, Ben is having the fall of Ben Solo or whatever. That's when Kylo Ren reveals he's Ben Solo, and then show that in the flashbacks. That would have been a lot cooler to do it that way.
Yeah, done right. So here's the thing, and looking into some stuff with this, like YouTube wise, there is like every other video you look up with Force Awakens is how to fix the sequel trilogy, how to fix the Force Awakens, and it's like there are so many routes that basically they could have taken any other route, mostly,
and it would have been better.
Probably come up with something, anything better, much better, much cooler. Honestly, even the route that they took. Okay, no, I was gonna say the route that they took, I have obviously flaws and problems with because of the fact that it has a lot to do with the characterization of Luke, which I completely disagree with within the sequel trilogy. But I don't know. There's a lot wrong with this movie. This one not so much. I know we joked about it before. And we've changed our format a little bit, but we talked about how it's like our tagline for the sequel trilogy when we're talking about them should be we watched them so that you don't have to. That was something I think you came up with. And I'll be honest, we didn't even watch this one, and this is the best of them. So think we messed that up.
I do want to. Well, I am going to watch the other two
the
just
next
because I want to
two.
see if they've improved. I do want to watch the other two just because I want to see if they've improved. But this movie, I mean, I know they haven't, but I'm not. One can hope. But this movie, I've seen the most of all of them.
Yeah.
This movie is actually the first movie that I saw multiple times in the theater. I think I ended up seeing this movie 3 or 4 times in the theater, which is actually the most of any movie I think that I've most times I've seen it in the theater. But when it came out, it had potential, and I know we've spent this whole past 50 minutes trashing on this movie, and I will give it this. I think it could have been a good movie if the sequels were better. If 8 and 9 were better, this movie would have been you could look over all of the.
Well, let's briefly talk about that because I have a specific thing I want to talk about within that realm. So, one huge reason why the sequels suck so bad is because they went into it with no plan whatsoever.
Mhm.
That's obvious, and that's been stated. A way in which that's obvious within this movie is Hux. The character of Hux makes no sense. So later on, we find out, right, that he's a resistance spy. I think in 8 or 9, we find that out, right? That's fair, right? You can even have a lot of what happens in this movie and still get to that point. But as a resistance spy, don't you think it's a little bit much to initiate the order that blows up the Senate? Among other things, but specifically that. Like, not only do you raid Jakku in trying to find this map that you could lead to Luke Skywalker and destroy him, so then this takes over. But you blow up the Senate, which is the biggest thing that really starts the downfall of whatever's left of the New Republic at that point, and really makes the resistance the resistance. But it's like the amount of really hard hitting blows that Hux is a part of in this movie, and I think even a little bit of the next one, are astounding when later you find out, oh, he's supposed to be a spy. It's like you can tell very much so he is not written in this movie to later be revealed to be a spy.
They could have done so much, even with the characters they came up with in this movie. They could have done them so much better. They not only mishandled the characters from the original trilogy that they brought in, they mishandled the original characters from this movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
I feel bad.
Look at Poe, or not Poe. Finn.
Yes,
Finn is an amazing character. Like
I
the
feel so
whole
bad for
idea
John
behind the
Boyega.
character of Finn. Yes, I do too. But the whole idea behind the character of Finn is amazing. And then they completely just ignore him in the next 2 movies.
Yes, I feel bad for him and Daisy Ridley, both. Ridley for the characters that I don't necessarily know. I've heard more from Daisy Ridley and John Boyega. What's the guy? Is it Oscar or something who plays Poe?
Oscar Isaac, yeah.
Is Oscar Isaac? That was the name that came to mind, but it didn't
Yeah.
completely sound right. So I feel less bad for him because I feel like in all honesty his character's not as bad. Like I feel like he's just he's basically the Han Solo of the series. He doesn't. It's hard to mess that character up, and the way that they did, I think, is fine. Obviously, he's a part of a lot of bad movies, but I actually don't know how much he cares about it either. I know John Boyega is a huge Star Wars fan, and I've heard a lot of things that Daisy Ridley's had a lot of backlash. Which, okay, I don't like Rey, but if Daisy Ridley were to play another character in Star Wars that was written well, I have no problem with the actress whatsoever. She's not even that bad. It's the way her character's written. You know,
Mhm.
and that's the same way they really just screwed it all up. And I think that they all know, like, they all understand the ridicule that the sequels get from Star Wars fans because, like, I think they understand it, even if they had fun making the movies and maybe have attachments to the characters. It's like, I think they've talked a little bit as much as they can with the contracts that they have about how just dysfunctional it was with the sets and how things were
I also
done.
really feel bad for Mark Hamill too.
Oh, he hated it.
Yeah, because they
He did it. He was like, the reason he did it too was he was like, anyways, so why not I take the
mm,
character over, But like he
mm.
read you see this, do you see the interviews with him? He's like, this is not what Luke Skywalker would do. And it's like, at least someone has a brain there. Too bad they
Mm.
wouldn't listen.
And when Mark Hamill's like, yeah, like I said, I really do feel bad because like think about this too. Luke Skywalker is probably his favorite role,
Mm-hmm.
and Disney made him basically kill it.
Yeah.
Like it's like with that, like it's not like Disney made Mark Hamill watch them kill Luke Skywalker. No, they put the gun in Mark Hamill's hand and said, "No, kill Luke Skywalker." That's
Mm-hmm.
that's what that. Like I said, I really do feel bad for Mark Hamill in those movies.
Yeah.
Like, so when they killed off Han Solo, I didn't have a problem with that because that's one of the like kind of more famous things. Like Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to be killed off, even in as far back as the Empire. That's why he got
Mm-hmm.
frozen to carbonite because Han Solo kept or because Harrison Ford kept trying to get Han Solo killed off. So George Lucas was like, oh, okay, well let's do this. So I can try to convince you to come back for the sequel. He's dead, but not
They
really. So
got
I can convince you
contracts
to
were
come
up in
back
the
for
air.
the
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
They had an easy write off for him, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, Harrison Ford wanted him killed off in uh, Return of the Jedi, which didn't end up happening. So yeah, we get that. So I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, I love the character of Han Solo,
It also fits.
but I didn't really.
It fits for the
Yes,
movie.
yes, it did. Although,
I think the way that they did it, I think it was good because his arc was complete.
mm, although Mark Hamill did mention this too, because when he said he was reading through the script, he's like, "Well, why are Rey and Finn there? Observing all this happening." When why can't Leia and I be there? Because that would make it much more emotional and make much more sense for us to be there. Like just barely got there too late.
Mm-hmm. Another thing with that in mind, I know everyone talks about the fact of how Leia and Rey embrace after Han dies, right? And she doesn't embrace Chewie, the friend that she's had for years and Han's closest companion. Um, but another thing with that is this is the first time Leia and Rey have met. That hug,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first time they met. What?
Yeah.
They hadn't had it. They did no time before this had they met. And who does she go to? This random girl that's coming out of the Falcon instead of okay. I just recently started playing through again the Lego Star Wars the Skywalker saga. Well, not playing through,
Mm-hmm.
but I continuing it. Well, I was finishing up the Force Awakens. And in it, at the end of it, right? Chewie goes and he's like, "Oh, he's running to Leia." Leia runs right past him to Rey, and he's like, "Wait a minute, what?" And it's like, yes, exactly. why does she do this? Like, it's Legos. It's supposed to be funny. It makes fun of this stuff. But it's like, it makes a perfect. It's like, why doesn't she go to Chewie? She doesn't even know who this girl is. She doesn't know this girl from, they usually say from Adam. She doesn't know this girl from Eve. It's like, it's just some random girl that got off the Falcon that she probably assumes is Rey, but she hasn't met her. She has no past with her. She has no
Also,
reason to
why?
embrace her.
Also, why is Rey that upset about losing Han? I mean, yes, someone died, but like, you knew him for like a day. And I mean, I guess you can make that same argument in A New Hope with Luke
I was
and
gonna,
Ben.
I was gonna say that. I was about to say that too.
But still,
But that even aside, like sure, you can get attached. Like let's say that I'm gonna put that off to the side. The fact that she's attached to him, I'm gonna put that off to the side. What doesn't make sense is Leia's reaction. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That annoying.
Yeah,
Okay,
it makes absolutely no sense.
This past week, I had been listening. I listened to the novelization of this or whatever, and it took me. I might have started listening to it the week before. I don't really remember, but it took me a little while to get through it. And I got to that point, and I like searched through my mind. I was like, yeah, no, this is the first time they got, and I was just like, I literally just busted out laughing because I was like, this makes literally no sense. And I tried to tell it to Sarah. I was trying to explain it to her, and she likes Star Wars, but she's not like you or me. When it comes to Star Wars, and I was like, I know, I'm gonna talk to David about this, like, but I just want to call him up right now and be like, this is so. And well, now I can get it off my chest.
It's there's a lot of things in this movie that are dumb if you actually think about it.
Yeah. Like I said, if you actually break this movie down and analyze it, it makes no sense whatsoever. Like nothing in this movie makes sense. On the surface level, it can be a good movie, but if you think about it, it all falls apart. Like
Well, and
immediately.
like I said, I think if this was the first movie in a trilogy that got better with each movie, this would be a perfect first movie. I would have no complaints with it whatsoever if the other two had gotten better and better. But because the other two are what they are, the flaws in this movie are just so much more apparent. And okay, it's like all of the other 6 Star Wars movies have flaws and have logical issues. But because they're Star Wars, no one cares. But because these 3 movies are so bad, you just can't ignore them. Ignore the logical issues.
Star Wars or not, they're literally 3 separate movies.
Yeah, they are.
Like in the lore and in what the story they're trying to tell, there's 3 separate movies, whereas the original 6 are 6 movies telling the same story.
And
I will say this.
Go
ahead.
What gets me too is George Lucas, when he sold Star Wars back in, what was it, 2012?
Somewhere in there.
But when he sold Star Wars to Disney, he gave Disney movie treatments for his 3 Star Wars sequels.
From what I've heard, again, anything would be better than what we got, but those would have been pretty cool.
Those would have been really good movies too.
Mm-hmm.
It basically would have centered around the New Republic fighting Darth Maul's crime syndicates.
Mm-hmm. Which would have been really cool. I do want to say this is one thing that you mentioned was like if we got 2 good movies after this, how you probably would say this is a perfect first movie and you wouldn't have any complaints with it. Coming out of the theater, I still had a bunch of complaints despite the fact that I really liked this movie. So I know for a
Mhm.
fact that in my head I would still have had problems because of the logical leaps that they take in this movie. But that being said, like, yeah, if this
Okay,
was the
my
first
my my
movie of
point my
the
point
trilogy, I still might overlook it, even if it's the weaker one of the bunch. You know, I'd
my
still
my my, po-
probably
my
choose
point
for the
was
sequel.
okay. My point was like, okay, so the prequels have a bunch of problems too,
Yeah,
but I find them hilarious. I find the problems hilarious. I feel like that with this movie, that's kind of the way it would become if
that's fair. That's
there were
fair.
actually good movies too. Like, yes, there's still problems with it, and yes, I would still acknowledge that there's problems with it. Like, I recognize the problems in the Star Wars movies that I like, but
Mhm.
if this movie had good sequels to it, it would you
It would cover up a lot of the problems. I
yeah,
get what you're saying.
yeah. Although one thing I will say for the sequels is they made the prequels a lot better
Yeah, yeah,
because since the sequels came out, I've heard a lot less trash talk about the prequels.
yeah. Well, it's all centered towards the sequel. Now, original trilogy and prequel trilogy, uh, lovers, haters can all gang up on the sequels.
Yeah.
Well, David, I I've ranted for a while now. There's
Mhm.
probably more to rant about, but do you have any final thoughts on the Force Awakens?
Uh, Probably should have watched it before talking about it.
That's fair.
Um, so I can't really say whether or not it holds up. It probably doesn't, just judging by how we've talked about it today. But
I think
yeah,
story wise is pretty decent. But I mean, you know, there's obviously those logical leaps that we've talked about in this, and it just doesn't always make sense. But I think, like I said, if you overanalyze it, you're gonna see all the flaws. But you do that with any movie. I mean, we were talking about the Santa Claus movies a couple weeks ago. We overanalyzed the first one, and that movie doesn't make sense if you overanalyze it. But if you just watch it for what it is, it can be a good movie. Star Wars, okay, there's a lot of things to Star Wars, and I think who was it? A while back, I saw a clip of I think it was Freddie Prinze Jr. talking about Star Wars, and he was like, "Star Wars is for kids." I don't completely disagree with that. Hey, I'll claim I'm a kid any day. I'm mentally I'm a kid, so that doesn't. No matter what someone says about Star Wars, if it's for kids or for not, I don't care. I love it nonetheless. But there are aspects of it that maybe don't need to be overanalyzed. However, that's what we do here. And,
mm,
if you just watch it for what it is and just kind of enjoy it as Star Wars, you can enjoy The Force Awakens. But if you actually start to look into what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, it's definitely near the bottom of the list of Star Wars movies.
we find it fun to overanalyze movies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we do here. So,
Yeah, yeah. So since we're done talking about that, I guess we should head to what's new with you.
all right.
What's new? What's new with you? What's new? What's new with you? What's new? What's new with you? Yeah!
Yeah.
So Wesley, what
So,
is
David,
new with
no, shut
you?
up. Shut up. Shut up. I asked the questions here. I'm bad cop.
I am
Anyways.
the captain now.
Oh, dang it. Fine. All right. What's new with me? Well, it has been a while since we've talked. So,
Yeah.
like I think the last podcast that we put out, we're recording this early, but this podcast will come out first of the year. Um, but last podcast we put of the year, we had done back to back, not like completely, but it was like a couple days apart. This time, this is like it's been at
2
least a
weeks.
week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks? Yeah, 2 weeks since we've talked. And we've texted a little bit in here. You were sick over Christmas, so when our family got together, you weren't able to come. So we haven't really talked much over the past 2 weeks. So there's a lot that's gone on, and we had Christmas and other things going on. So yeah, there's a lot that's new. Where do I start? I don't really know. There's a lot of things I need to mention to you, and I probably need to put some things off.
Yeah. Well,
I miss
as you just mentioned, I survived the flu over Christmas, so yeah.
I know.
That was
I
fun.
heard that you got sick, and like we had just talked. I think you got sick Thursday, and I think we had talked recently. I think, and I was like, yeah, he probably is gonna get me sick over video call. Luckily, I didn't. I didn't get sick. I'm still good. Knock on wood. I'm still good. So you didn't contaminate me, but
Mhm.
yeah. That being said, I you. But I finally got Sarah starting to play KOTOR, and I hadn't really ever paid attention. It's been a while since I played through it. But I never really paid attention before. But she came to the realization real quick that it's basically Dungeons and Dragons, but Star Wars.
It's an RPG, so yeah. I mean, it's also
Yeah.
turn-based, so
Yeah, but like the way I never really thought it and looked at it, but like we mentioned that, and I looked up on the screen, and I was like, my phone on my way. I looked up the screen and it said like whatever the skill, whatever she was doing, or the weapon she was using, it was like D12 or something, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like legitimately all kinds of I mean, it's the type of game it is, but I'd never really thought about it. Never really. I mean, I played this when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12 years old, and I haven't
did
played
you
through
even
it
know what
since then.
Dungeons and Dragons was then?
No, I probably had heard of it. I'd never played it before.
Yeah.
It's not something my family would have been for. Uh, witches
Yeah.
and witchcraft. I don't know. Anyways, but that's something I've been doing. What have you been doing?
I mean, I've been
Dying.
cooking a lot.
What you been cooking?
Well, last week I made a big pot of chili. That was good. Because it's chili, yeah. No. Literally, I put like I ended up putting like about a cup of diced peppers in that chili. So it was good chili.
It warmed you up real good.
And really cleared out your sinuses too.
Apparently not well enough. You got sick.
True.
Anyways, it should have cleared out your whole system, but yeah, with that not mine though. You said chilly because it was chilly. Like a week or two ago, it was like freezing, and then like
Oh yeah,
literally Friday or Saturday. We live in the Carolinas, so Friday or Saturday, it all of a sudden was like the low was like 50 and the high was like 60 or 70. Like it was like that, and it was like right through Christmas, and then like I think we're recording this on a Tuesday, and I think like
the Tuesday after Christmas.
Later this week, it's supposed to start getting cold again. And it's like that brief period around Christmas. It's like, nope. I want to make sure you'll live in the Carolinas. I want to make sure you can wear shorts and short sleeves.
It's never cold on Christmas or here. It's weird.
No. Never had a white Christmas. We've had snow in the winter. I think maybe once. I've lived in South Carolina my whole life. I remember I think one white Christmas. And usually it's shorts and short sleeves on Christmas. You can wear that and be fine.
Yeah, it's
Carolinas are interesting.
No, it's definitely interesting. Interesting is definitely a word for it.
I want to dive into this at some other point. I feel like this would be something to talk about at a later point. But I recently, let me actually find what the name of the book is. earlier. And what was like um, the public deceived, and it is a audiobook, or it's a book that follows the events of the I don't know if it's Great Black War or what, but it follows the a couple different characters, one of which is Darth Malgus. Yeah, Malik is Revan's apprentice. This is Malgus. Okay, I'm pretty sure. I got a little confused when I was listening to it. Their names are very similar. This guy's a lot cooler than Revan's apprentice. But you know the old Republic video game. There's a bunch of clips on YouTube of it, and like the story of the Jedi Temple and all. This is basically following that. A lot of what happens there, the conquering of Coruscant, and all those things that happen. It's a very good book, and I've really gotten really interested in a lot of the Old Republic recently, and specifically this character here because he is very cool. And it's actually something that I'm right character for and a little bit of them, but um, after
cutting in and
listening
out
to
here.
this, I'll see if I can fix that. How bad am I cutting in and out?
Yeah. You're better now, but
Better? Okay. Well, hopefully it starts working. Mouse. Put them up to show. I will just fact check myself. Anyways, it's a lot. I haven't looked a lot into this, but apparently he's one of the more powerful ancient Sith lords. Believed to be, or so. And apparently, Darth Vader took a lot of inspiration from him in canon, not in canon, in that universe. I'm sure, obviously, it'd be the other way around because the egg came before the chicken here, I think, or the chicken came before the egg. I don't know. Anyways, we all know how Star Wars came about, but anyways, it's a cool character. It's one that I wouldn't mind talking about at some point because he's a part of the Sith Order. This is long time before Darth Bane established his rule of two. The Sith Academy is around. This is around, I believe, 37,000 BBY. A couple hundred years, but I think about 300 years after Darth Revan started, or maybe not after his born, but a couple hundred years after Darth Revan did his thing and all that happened. But this is the Sith Empire time frame. There's a bunch of other Sith lords and all, but he doesn't he disagrees a lot with a lot of what the Sith do. And he has a very interesting take on a lot of the different things. It's interesting to listen to his thoughts, in the book and all that stuff. But he does a lot of things for a while, long time. Does a lot of things in that time, a lot of influential things. It might be something to dive into at some point. But I think I was a cool character, and I will mention that because I've listened to it. Thought you might be interested. But
no.
That's a lot of what I've been doing.
But I actually did just get the Thrawn trilogy too. That made me think of that.
Now, I know I asked you about this.
I did mention before on the podcast that I had started listening to the audiobook of Heir to the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't really get too far into that because the audiobook I was listening to was on YouTube. I didn't really like that version of it. So I didn't really get that far into it. So I might just start reading it, just see how All right, I'm gonna try reading it to see how far I can get into it, just doing it that way. Um, yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I need to get around to listening to those. Me and Sarah have Audible, and we have the thing for that to listen.
Mm.
And every single book that I've gotten has been Star Wars related, besides the Ballad of the Songbird and Snakes, which is one that I did get. But well, she might have the book. I'm not sure if she has the book or not. I know she read it. I don't remember how she read it. Anyways, like all the ones I've gotten on Star Wars related, but I haven't gotten any of the Heir to the Empire books, which is something that I do know I need to read through. I'll definitely read through before any of the new movies come out.
Mm-hmm.
That are probably gonna follow those events pretty closely. But I don't know. I'm so we've talked about this before. I'm so tired with a lot of the Skywalker era of Star Wars because it's all that we get within
Yeah.
Star Wars content. So I like the Old Republic a lot more when I look at a lot of the older stories. I like ancient stuff, Old Republic, things like that. But Heir to the Empire, I've heard nothing but good things about it. It's definitely something I know I need to check out.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that book.
Mm. How I know you sent me a picture of them, but like how thick are they? Are they pretty thick books?
Oh, they're probably like each one's probably about an inch and a half thick.
Okay.
So they're not huge books, but they're not tiny either.
Yeah, they're decent size. Yeah, I'll probably just listen to the audiobook of that. I'm much better at that than reading. Um, I'm not a big reader. Like there's certain times I can sit down and read something, but the constant having to pick up a book and read it like through a couple of days, I can't do that. I mean,
Mm.
I've done it, but it's not my forte. I'm not a big reader. So, oh well, right.
Yeah.
There's other things that have happened, but I feel like they can be saved for a later date because there are things that are constantly happening that I can talk about. So,
True. Yeah. I feel like it's all I got though.
that's all you got.
Being sick doesn't really allow me to do much.
That's very true. This is one thing I would guess I'll ask you because there's one thing I was going to postpone to a later time of talking about, but if there's not much else to talk about, have you watched any of the new Percy Jackson series?
I have not. But actually, that did just remind me of something though. Did you watch
Okay.
Rebel Moon yet?
Nope.
Watch it. It's really good.
Is it it's a show, right?
No, it's a movie.
It's a movie. Okay. I had seen that it came out, but I hadn't watched it. I was too lazy to take the time
Mm-hmm.
to watch something new. I do that a lot. I don't watch a whole lot of new things. I like sticking with The Office,
Yes, I know.
basically. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
trying to so I have two sisters for anyone listening to this that doesn't know that. Two sisters. The oldest is Katie, the middle child. I'm the youngest. The middle is Taylor. I've gotten Taylor to listen to or watch a bit of The Office. Katie won't watch it out of spite. Which I'm hoping I can convince her one day to watch it. But Taylor is has tried to watch through some of it, and I actually gave her the box set to watch it. She still hasn't watched it all. But she recently for Christmas she got the whole entire series of Friends, and she loves Friends. And she's like, "Oh, now I can watch this." And I'm like, "No, watch The Office first, then you can watch Friends." But I don't know. I have a lot of work to do with them, trying to convince them that The Office is the greatest show of all time. No,
Mhm.
no contenders whatsoever. Shut up, David.
All right, so what are we talking about?
I don't know. I was done. I was done talking about.
You were done talking about? Or what were you
I
done
was done
talking about?
stuff, everything. I was done talking.
Oh, okay. Well, at that point, we should probably go ahead and just wrap things up then.
Probably we don't want to drag this on for too much longer.
I really could drag it on for too much longer, but that might not be that
We could.
entertaining to listen to.
I feel like people will probably get pretty bored and click away.
Let's be honest. If they've stuck around this long, they don't care what they're listening to.
That's true. That's true. They probably have already zoned out. So zone back in. Hello.
How?
Hi. How you
You're
doing?
yelling in
Hi,
my ear.
name's Wesley Saber, and this is the Trailcast. If you liked it and you've actually been watching up until this point in time, go ahead and like this video. Leave a 5-star review. I think that's something you could do somewhere, right? I've heard it a lot. Anyways, and subscribe to the channel if you like this content and think it's something you'd like to watch more of. If not, subscribe anyways. Actually, no, don't. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. If you don't like it, don't subscribe. Anyways, tell a friend.
Well, Explorer,
All
that's
right,
about all the
what do you
time we
got?
have for today.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode.
Let us know what you thought in the comments down below, or you can DM us on Instagram at downthereaperture YT.
And with that, all we have left to say is be sure to join us next week on the Trailcast. And have a very, very merry, happy new year.